And good evening, everyone. This is Jason Horsch coming to you live from another broadcast from Xanadu Gallery. I'm Jason Horsch, owner of Xanadu Gallery and publisher of red.blog.com.
Hi there, and I'm Barney Davey, publisher of art print issues and a variety of art marketing books, and pleased to be here with you tonight. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Barney. Good to be back with you again. This is episode number 36 of our ongoing series of Art Talk. You know, Barney, we keep talking about coming up with a name for this broadcast. Right. And I think the only times that I really think about it are right now when we're starting, and I'm wishing I could say, here we are for the fill-in-the-blank podcast. But, you know, here we are 36 episodes in. We'll come up with it eventually, I'm sure. And today is Tuesday, January 13th, 2015 now. We want to wish all of you a happy new year. And tonight's topic for discussion is related to the new year. The new year is a time of making resolutions and plans and pushing forward and thinking about the possibilities. So tonight, Barney and I wanted to discuss goal setting and project management is what we named this podcast, and probably not the most exciting name for discussion, you know, especially with those in the creative fields like artists, like our audience. Goal setting and project management sounds pretty corporate and maybe even a little bit boring, but the principles that we're going to be talking about tonight are so important, and I think Barney and I both agree that the importance of setting goals and you know, coming up with quantifiable steps that you can take to achieve those goals, the importance of that cannot be overstated.
Absolutely true, Jason. New Year's resolutions, I think, cause a lot of people to have negative feelings maybe towards goal setting, because resolutions get set like I'm going to lose 10 pounds, or I'm going to start working out, or whatever, I'm going to quit smoking, or whatever the case might be, and there isn't any real plan of action for it, and maybe not even a true buy-in from the person. It's something that they think that they should do, but they haven't really bought into that to the point where they're going to follow through on it. And so for the most part, I don't know anybody who's actually set New Year's resolutions and completed them. But I do know plenty of people who set realistic goals for themselves and completed them. Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, famously said, "If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there." And that's the inverse of having a goal, and that's I don't have a plan, and I'm just instead of being proactive, I'm being reactive. I just react to whatever's going on in the world at the moment, and that puts you in a terrible place all the time. You're just responding to, you know, it's a management by crisis, and it's really hard to get ahead, to know where you're to find yourself in a position where you actually made some serious headway on improving your career, making more sales, having more collectors, getting in more galleries. Those things don't happen easily, and they certainly, you make it a whole lot easier on yourself if you have goals set forth to help give you guidelines on what you're going to do next or what you're going to do tomorrow.
Well, and I think that it's easy for all of us to pretty quickly get caught up in the day-to-day of life, and I certainly find myself with this, that there's always something coming up that you need to work on, and it's very easy for you to lose sight of the big picture in the long term, and before you know it, you're sitting at the beginning of a new year and saying, where did the last one go? And you know, all those things that I wanted to achieve, you know, unfortunately just fell by the wayside because I was doing little and maybe unimportant things rather than focusing on my big picture. So my hope is that in our conversation tonight we can talk about some real-world techniques that are going to help us all do better at this and do better at keeping the big picture in mind. And we've had this conversation previously. We've actually done broadcasts both on this subject and topics related to it. But even for me, I feel like it's a good subject to just bring into focus every once in a while, to be able to redouble my own efforts to be more focused and more persistent and consistent in setting goals and then working towards completing them. So I'm hopeful that we can also work toward giving you some tools and some tricks that we've learned along the way that have helped us better achieve our goals. So what do you think, Barney? Where should we begin the conversation tonight?
Well, let me just say we could talk about tools and so forth, but I just want to say that I think you need to, the point of goals is to not only just write down what you want to do, but to prioritize what's truly important to you. You can have so many different goals and be trying to pull yourself in so many different directions that you'll become discouraged because you're not really getting traction on any of the things that you want to do. So I think to be effective with goals to begin with, you need to have them down to those things that are most important. And we're talking just career here. You can have other kinds of goals like your personal goals, for instance, as I mentioned, losing weight or quit smoking or something like that. We're not here to get into those kind of things. I think you can kind of segment into big silos. This is personal, this is perhaps spiritual or financial, and this is career, and we're going to focus on that career silo. But I don't think that anybody other than superhuman types of people can have more than 2 or 3 really big goals in any one of those silos and expect to do anything more with it. So I would tell anybody listening, the place to start is with some kind of brainstorming so that you get down all the possibilities of things that would be good goals for yourself onto something, whether it's thebrain.com or MindMap, or there's MindMeister, there's all kinds of brain mapping software, there's just pen and paper, just putting things down and putting circles on it and drawing lines to it and Xing them out. Eventually get it down to the point, if you spend enough time on it, you will capture all of the potential ideas, and then you can begin to think about it and cogitate on it for a day or two. And the really important things, where you want to be in 12 months from now or even 3 years from now, should bubble up to the top. And whether that's I want to add 5 more galleries, I want to be in 5 more galleries, or I'd like to have 20 more collectors, or maybe it's in production, I want to ramp my production up I want to be able to do an additional 10 originals, or whatever the case might be. Figure out what those things are and commit to them on paper, and that would be a great place to start. That now you've got some goals that are achievable, and you have to measure those against what's realistically possible given your own resources and skills and abilities. But get yourself some achievable goals, and then we can start talking about what you do next to get there. So I hope that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, and I think that in a couple things that you mentioned there, a lot of times I think that we as human beings start to think about this question, okay, what is it that I want to do? What do I want to have happen? And it is almost inevitable that you're going to start right away doubting yourself, even to the point of thinking that, well, what if I'm setting the wrong goals? What if I don't know what's most important? What direction should I be going in? But something that I found interesting about having goals, and as Barney mentioned, consciously working towards achieving those goals, is that just the mere act of setting a goal and putting your force and effort into achieving that goal starts to make positive things happen around you in your life, and it opens up opportunities for you. And I think we'll talk a little bit later about having some flexibility in your goals. But before we do that, I think it's just important to realize that just the act of starting to move forward and to start to gain some inertia, it means that you don't really have to worry so much about choosing the right or wrong goals, and really who's to say what's right or wrong for anyone. But just having that goal and pushing forward, starts chains of events that keep you moving in a positive direction. And so, as Barney mentioned, setting some big goals and not feeling stuck or trapped in your current life or what's going on with your business, but thinking about what the possibilities might be, and then setting, as Barney mentioned, some achievable goals to move you toward that, can be a very powerful force in your life. And Barney, I think it's also important, and maybe now is a good time to talk about it. I think that even the definition of a goal, maybe we need to talk a little bit, because I think that sometimes people will think, I want to set a goal. Well, my goal is to sell $100,000 worth of art this year. My goal is, like you said, my goal is to lose 50 pounds this year. But if you're not careful, you end up setting a wish instead of a goal. And so I think it's important. Let's maybe define a little bit more clearly what you have to be doing in order to set a goal, and what kind of the boundaries are of goals, and what defines a goal. And maybe, Barney, I'll let you take a first crack at it. What is a goal?
I've never really actually tried to define what is a goal, but to me, it is something that you want, just off the top of my head, it would be something that you want to achieve in your life or in your career. In some kind of way, it's a milestone. I want to get to, I want to better myself in some way. And so it could be losing weight, or adding collectors, or making more art, or just having more dollar volume sales. I would encourage anyone listening not to get hung up on what it is particularly. Just, does it fit with what you're trying to do? I'm taking some of my students, if you will, through a 4-week course on, I call it Art Marketing Mastery, and some of them, they're at different stages in their career. Some of them don't have as much sales as others, so they feel uncomfortable making a dollar volume sale because they don't have enough past experience to come into it and say, yeah, I can do 20% better than that, because it doesn't feel right for them. And that's a perfect example where I would say, well, let's talk about what other things you could do. Like, do you want to get into some galleries over the next year? Would you like to think about getting into the print market or getting into licensing? Would you like to find, a number of collectors? Let's find some things that feel comfortable and right for you, and select those objectives. And maybe that's a good word for a goal. It's a clear objective that you want to achieve. And I always put this caveat on it. It has to be based on realistic expectations after a brutal assessment of what your available resources are. You have to look at your finances, your own marketing skills, whether you have some help or not, where you are in the marketplace, what your production capacity is, and just put all those things into the mix so that you're being honest with yourself about what you can achieve, and then you use that to kind of give yourself a point forward that looks doable. In fact, what I learned this from a supervisor in a job I had. We set daily goals at the place where I was working. There was the minimum, the goal, and the stretch, and I love that because this was a commitment that I made to myself and to him and to my team, that every day I would meet the minimum, and I would expect to at least to do the goal, but I would never, I would do everything possible under the sun to not do less than the minimum. I was working toward the goal and hoping that I would hit the stretch, but it gave me it gave me a zone to work on, so I wasn't just one place. I had kind of a fallback position and I had a move forward position, and I found that to be extremely helpful, and I saw what it did not only for me but for the team. So when you go about setting goals, you don't have to just say, I'm going to have 5 collectors by the end of the year. You could say, at a minimum, I want 3. I expect to get 5, and a stretch would be 8 or 10 or something like that. So I probably rambled on beyond what a goal is, but I hope that's helpful to some extent when just getting your arms around what is a goal.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's great advice to have it be something concrete, as you just talked about, something that you can say, okay, I want to get 5 collectors, or I want to get in 3 galleries. Those are things that you can sink your teeth into, and you'll know whether or not you've succeeded, because there's something very solid that you can measure there. And the other important part of that then is to not just have the goal, but to have the intermediary objectives and strategies that are going to help you get there. And as Barney was mentioning earlier, writing down your goal is important, and I believe that very much. I also believe it's then important to take that goal and ask yourself, what are the steps that I could take to push me in that direction? Especially on a larger goal, one that's going to take some significant time, 6 months or a year or a couple of years. Boy, if you just have that goal in and of itself sitting out there, and then you don't go to the next step of breaking it down and figuring out what you need to do to get yourself from wherever you are to where you want to be, you can very easily become overwhelmed by the goal. Or worse, you can just let it slide off and fall into procrastination, thinking, well, I know I need to get 5 galleries representing me, but I'm not sure what I need to do today to make that happen. And pretty soon, you've got a show that you've got to get ready for, and some advertising that you're doing, and you get caught up in those cycles, and again, that goal slips away from you, and like we said, you end up wondering, whatever happened to that? Why didn't I achieve that? And so, breaking it up and then putting some real time and effort into planning it out and what you're going to be doing. And I would also say that one of the most important tools you can use in goal setting and achieving your goals is having a calendar in front of you where you start to think about, what are my timelines for achieving all of this? What am I going to be doing to push myself forward within these timelines that I've set for myself? And so I guess we're going to talk about a number of tools today, but I would think that a calendar might be one of the best first tools to start with after you've started writing down your goal and breaking down the various components of that goal.
Good point. A calendar is going to be your best friend, and a goal should have some timelines with it. If you just have some nebulous goal that I'd like to get 5 collectors, well, by when? By 12 months from now, or 18 months from now, or 6 months from now? That will inform other decisions. You were mentioning you need to break things down, and that moves you into that project planning, which is part of this process and title of the workshop here, or the hangout. What you want to do is get that goal and get a time frame and commit to it on a calendar, so that, say, by November I want to have 5 collectors. Well, what do you need to do how many different things do you need to do to find 5 collectors? I need to start networking. Well, what does that mean? I need to find ways to get out and be with people, whether it's online or in person, that makes sense, that's targeted. So you have to give yourself some time and to do the research and be there, and you start figuring out step by step, incrementally, what you need to do. Ultimately, what I want the people in my workshop to go through, and I talk about it in my book, Guerrilla Marketing for Artists, if you get these goals set and then you break them down to the smallest possible step, and then have that step on some kind of a reminder system. I know you and I both use Todoist, and we'll talk about that. Then if you do that every day, you're never you're never feeling like overwhelmed, like I've got steps 1 through 16 to get done today. You have step 1 to do today, or maybe you've gone through the continuum and you're on step 6. So you knock step 6 off and don't worry about it, and you'll go back to doing the other things that you do that's part of your daily routine, but you've woven in something toward your goal, and that's how you stay on track, in my opinion, towards achieving those kind of goals, is breaking it down, committing to do it, and then actually doing it. And I'd like to throw in one more thing that I think would really be helpful. I know it is for lots of people, and that is get an accountability partner. Find somebody else who's interested in doing something similar to you. If you're an artist, find another artist. It doesn't have to be somebody in your guild. It could be somebody online. It could be somebody that you've met through Facebook. It could be a spouse or a family member. I don't think spouses are necessarily good accountability partners. You got enough accountability with them for other things. And in some ways, you're more accountable to someone else maybe than you are even your family on something, because your family might let you off the hook, but an accountability partner, their job is to kick your butt. So think about that. If you're really serious about wanting to achieve your goals, find somebody else who's also serious about it and look for them to become an accountability partner and report back to each other. I did what I said I was going to do this week. I took my 3 or 5 or 6 steps over the course of the last 7 days. So I mentioned Todoist. Is this a good segue to move into that, Jason?
Yeah. Why don't we go ahead and jump into some of the tools now, and we can give some real world examples of how we use these. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull Todoist up and do a quick screen share.
Okay.
And I know I've done a broadcast on Todoist in the past, and I'm not sure maybe you have as well. So some of you might be familiar with the tool. But it's a free online service. There's a premium version, but you can get on and use it for free. And for most of the audience, the free version is going to be more than sufficient for what you need. But the beautiful thing about Todoist is that it allows you to do exactly what we were talking about. Kind of take a general goal and turn that into a project, and then go in and basically break it down into the component parts. And as Barney mentioned, and I will definitely agree, the smaller you can break those parts down, the more likely you are to get them rolling and get them conquered and achieve what you're aiming for. And then even better, you can break it down by date and start setting dates with each individual task. And then when you come into Todoist in the morning, and I will tell you that when I get into the gallery in the morning, the very first thing that I do every day without fail is I fire up Todoist and I pull up today's task list, if you will, and I prioritize what I'm going to be working on. And I always try to put not the most urgent things first, I try to put the most important things first. And I think that's an important distinction for us to just mention here, is that urgent things are those things that somebody's after you to finish, or something's due tomorrow or whatever it is, and you can get really easily caught up in those urgent things. But when you step back and look at them, did they help you achieve your goal? Were they something that moved you forward towards your objectives? And if the answer is no, then they're probably urgent but not important. Now, the important things might not always be urgent. And so what I try and do is, and Todoist allows you to do this, you can just very easily grab your tasks for the day and shift them around, and very easily just start at the top of your list then and work your way down through it. And that's been very, very powerful for me, to try and be more disciplined about how I approach things. And the great thing about it is that what you'll find is that those urgent things, the things that are screaming for your attention, you can push them off until later in the day, get the important things done, and then just by their very nature of being urgent at the end of the day, you'll be able to get in and push yourself and stretch your day if you need to get them done. Whereas if you put them at the beginning of the day, they tend to fill up the day, and you're out of energy at the end, and you think, oh, I just can't do anything else, and now I've got these important things that I should have been working on, but you know what, I'm going to push them off till tomorrow, and again, you get caught in that cycle. And so, if I could make one beginning recommendation be for you to check out Todoist and see if it works. And obviously it's not going to work for everyone's approach to how they manage their projects, but it's been a great tool for me to be able to plan out my long-term objectives, break them down, and then be able to, on a day-by-day basis, look at exactly what I need to be getting done. And Barney, I think you use Todoist as well. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I do use Todoist, and I have probably 70 tasks or so on one of my lists. And you mentioned to me one time you had 70 tasks, and I gave you one, and you said I'm putting it on my list, and it's probably number 46, and it'll probably stay number 46. And that's the same for me. There's things that I'd like to do, and they're almost wishful thinking to some extent, but at least I've committed it somewhere into writing that I'd like to at some point get to that. But I use the priority color coding when I make a goal, unless I put a specific date, like I want to do it by tomorrow or by Friday. I'll prioritize by color, and then you can just hit the settings button on Todoist, and it'll give you the option to sort by priority. So it'll pull all my red, which are your highest priorities, to the top of that list, and then I can drag the red ones around, and those are the ones I try to get to, like you said, first. Stephen Covey, one of my all-time heroes, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, had something he used in a demonstration. He called it "put the big rocks in first." And he took a mason jar, and he put sand and small rocks in, and then he had some big rocks, and he couldn't get the big rocks in. So he emptied everything out and showed that if you put the big rocks in, you can now add some pebbles in on top of that and sand in on top of that, and still get the same amount of rocks and sand and pebbles into a mason jar. But you have to put the big rocks in first, or they remain outside the jar if you start working on the pebbles and the sand, and those are those smaller urgent tasks, phone calls or an email or something that you could put it off. It's not the end of the world if that person has to wait until tomorrow or whatever. But if you get those big rock tasks out of the way every day, you really make your life easier. You have less stress. You probably helps your blood pressure and a whole lot of other things. It's not always the most fun thing to do, but the successful people do things that aren't fun. In fact, I want to read to you a quote. I put it up on Facebook, and I just reconnected with Stephen Covey. I bought the CDs. I've been following him for 20 years, and it's his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, has made an enormous impact on my life over the last 2 decades. But this quote says, and it's not his quote, it's from a person named E.M. Gray, who wrote The Common Denominator of Success. Successful people have the habit of doing the things failures don't like to do. They don't like doing them either necessarily, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose. So, it's really powerful. What he is saying there is, put the big rocks in. No, and this comes back to goals. I talk about goals as touchstones, and if you really buy into that, then if you look at what my activities are, and is this furthering my major goals, or is this really not important to my major goals? And if I only have so much time, do the thing that's going to further your goals first. Put those big rocks in. You'll find that you have more time. You probably lowered your blood pressure, and you're getting the most important thing. You're accomplishing things. Probably the sense of accomplishment is the greatest thing that for me from doing goals, and Todoist is kind of cool because they'll let you know how many goals you've done. So after a while, you get kind of it feels good when you start ticking those boxes off. I don't know how you feel about that, Jason, but I do when
For sure.
I know that I've accomplished. Hey, I've taken 4 or 5 things off of my to-do list that were there, and those are out of the way. I've cleared the decks for me to be able to go on and do something else. So whether you use to-do-list or not, get something that a to-do list that goes in hand with a calendar, and now you're moving yourself closer and closer towards that situation where you're getting things done properly.
And I will encourage you to, we've already talked about breaking a task down into smaller components and smaller objectives, but if there is a particular thing that you need to be doing, but for whatever reason it feels very unappealing, you're looking to get into galleries, and you know that you need to be doing some research on the various gallery markets and compiling a list of galleries or whatever it is that you're working on, and there's just one component of it that just does not feel appealing to you, and you keep procrastinating and pushing off because it doesn't seem like fun. And what I've found is that when I have something like that, I'll take that particular item and I'll break it down even further. And this is going to sound totally stupid, but if you looked in my Todoist, there would be times where you would see tasks like open word processor. It's the stupidest thing in the world, but sometimes, again, if I can just have something that I know I can do and that starts me moving forward down that list, and then I open my word processor and I can check that off, and now I'm on to the next step, which was doing the research or whatever it was. Like I say, I know it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes just having even the smallest goal or the smallest objective that you can put into play, get done, and then move on to the next one is very powerful. Then the other thing that I found to be very important is to just kind of get in habits and on a daily basis, instead of trying to get something done all at once, break. Even if you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again, but breaking it up into a number of days makes it a lot more manageable. And I'll give an example. It used to be that when I was getting ready for a show in the gallery, we would always plan, our openings are always going to be on Thursdays because we have the weekly art walk here in Scottsdale. And so it used to be that I would talk to the artists, and we would schedule to have the artwork delivered to the gallery, or the artist would bring it to the gallery on the Tuesday afternoon or even sometimes Wednesday morning before the opening. And then I would spend all day Wednesday and probably a good part of the morning on Thursday rehanging the gallery and preparing for this opening. And that would nearly kill me. Just these long hours of putting everything together and getting it done. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I tried a different approach. And instead of having the artist deliver the work to me the week of the show, I would ask them to get it to me a full 10 days to 2 weeks before the show opens. And then I would spend 40 minutes in the morning, first thing when I got into the gallery, 40 minutes rehanging one small part of the gallery or moving sculpture into place. And then after 40 minutes, I would just stop, go about my day, and then the next day come in and do another 40 minutes. And 40 minutes was very manageable and doable for me. And suddenly that task that had seemed almost Herculean and just I would dread it, has become something that I barely even think about anymore because it's so easy and really almost pleasant. So again, if you can find ways to break things up into small manageable chunks and then just dedicate a small amount of time to doing it, and obviously you have to plan ahead to be able to do this, you're going to be able to do things in a much more manageable and pleasant way.
That's a excellent point. The book Getting Things Done by David Allen has been the #1 book in the time management category on Amazon for 10 years. I think it's got something like 1,300 reviews, going on 1,400 reviews, and it's 4.5 stars. So that tells you this information that he's presenting is extremely powerful. And I've read the book more than once. He sells a whole getting things done system. And I can tell you the essence of it. The one idea that is most important, and you just personified it with what you were describing on how you've broken the gallery thing down to some extent, Jason, and that is you get things done by getting them into manageable increments. And the other part of it is, and this wouldn't apply to the gallery hanging situation, but it would apply to goal setting and project planning and putting things down on paper, and that is that you're much less productive when you're always worried about that thing that you forgot to do, that you need to do, pay a bill, contact an artist, reserve the plane, whatever the case might be. There's always stuff that you need to do that's kind of, you're worried that it's, did I do it? Should I do it now? And Alan's concept is this: if you have a system to call up those things, like we've been talking about with Todoist, or it could be just a calendar reminder through Google Calendar that works equally as well for you. You don't have to use Todoist, just something that helps you automate the system. If you've got a reminder to do something on a certain day at a certain time, and you begin to rely on that and trust that, then you've cleared your mind. You've given yourself a peace of mind that you don't even know that you don't have, because you're too worried about all these things that you're committed to, and whether it's opening your word processor or making sure that on a certain day a month that you go over your bills and get them set up to auto pay, or however you want to do it. I'm mentioning that because that's how I do it. I have a reminder on the 8th of the month that I'm going to go into my bank account, review the bills that I pay monthly, and set them up to be paid on a certain date. And so on the 8th of the month, I worry about that one time, and then I never worry about my bills. That works out for me, the way the flow of my bills comes in. So I've basically automated that. I don't like putting anything on auto pay. I just want to control what's going on. But that's as close to auto pay as I can get. I will set it up to go through on the 15th or the 29th or whenever it's due. I think that's a perfect example of how you use the getting things done philosophy and the tools that we've been talking about to get stuff off your brain and onto a system, so that you can concentrate on the more important tasks, like finding a collector. And the more time you give yourself to find collectors, the more productive you're going to be at those tasks. And I think that's a good segue to just talk briefly about the My Ideal Week from Michael Hyatt that you and I have both used in the past to help us get a grasp on how we use our time effectively. You
Sure.
want to mention how it might have helped you?
Yeah, and so this really is just kind of an extension of what we've already been talking about, and I should tell you that Barney had put me on to both of the tools we're going to be talking about, Todoist, and he also put me on to the Ideal Week. But the concept is that if you're going to be breaking down your tasks and figuring out when to get things done, the next logical step is to try and plan your week and break that down into blocks of time where you can be dedicated and focused on doing the various things that you need to get done. And I think this is particularly important to an artist, and even more important to an artist who's juggling a lot of other responsibilities, whether it be home responsibilities, family responsibilities, or if you have another job that you're working to make ends meet. Having a plan in front of you that tells you how you're going to be spending your week, and then working hard to be disciplined and stick to that plan, is going to be an incredibly powerful experience for you if you haven't already done this. And I think what happens a lot of times is we think, well, it's Sunday night, and I know what I need to get done for the rest of this week, and you maybe think about it for a couple of seconds, and you think, okay, on Tuesday I'm going to try and do this, and on Wednesday I'll try and do that. But the problem with that is that life quickly falls apart on you, and if you don't have a more formal plan in place, unfortunately, you often don't see yourself accomplishing those tasks. And so, in essence, the ideal week is a spreadsheet where you've blocked out each day in columns, and then you just created blocks of time where you're going to be focused on each of these tasks. The other benefit of this is that it prevents you from trying to multitask, and I think multitasking is it is a detriment to your ability to achieve goals. I've never known anyone who could really do two things at once, and trying to do so, trying to multitask. Instead of getting two things done at once, you end up getting zero things done, and so the ideal week just allows you. Yeah, exactly. The ideal week then allows you to plot that out. Maybe Barney, if you want to talk about it for a few seconds here, I'll try and pull up. If I had been more prepared, I would have an ideal week that I could pull up.
You have 168 hours during a week. You're probably sleeping a third of that time, so that leaves you maybe I'll say 120 to 100, let's say 120 hours a week to do something with. So if you block it out like Michael Hyatt does, he doesn't read his emails all day long, and I don't think you do either, Jason.
I don't.
He's relegated email to not urgent. It's important, but not urgent. If somebody is really urgent with him, maybe they can call. He's got an assistant. He's got a blog that has 500,000 views every month, and he's a best-selling author and a speaker and former president of Thomas Nelson, which is the world's largest Christian book publishing company. So he's really a busy person, but he doesn't read his email all day long. He reads his email at a certain time. I think he looks at it twice a day. He blocks out when you can see it there. He's got the quiet time and reading time. He actually puts in his exercising. He's somebody who's devoted to staying in shape physically as well as mentally and spiritually. He blocks out time for a date with his wife every Friday night, and as many evenings with them, and going to church. But he's basically organized his life into blocks, and it's not a perfect situation, and he's not going to adhere to this 100%. But I think what most artists can do, or anybody for that matter, can do with a spreadsheet like that is find out where you're leaking time. If you put the spreadsheet down and then keep track for a week of how you spent your time, you may be surprised that I spent 6 hours or 8 hours on email, or whoops, I spent 3 hours or 4 or 5 hours, who knows, let's be honest now, on Facebook. Facebook is a lot of fun, but for most people, it's just a complete time suck and a way to not get things done. So what we're convened here today for is to talk about setting goals and moving your career forward, and to some extent that might mean taking some of the things off the table that are slightly pleasurable, like looking at funny cat pictures on Facebook, but don't move your agenda forward. And if you have a goal and you're really serious and committed to that goal, it makes it a lot easier to forego looking at cat pictures and spend your time on doing something else. And we're not saying that you should just become a robot and slave to your calendar and be working at becoming successful every minute of the day. Hyatt has time for working out. He has time for going to church and vespers and taking his wife on a date. So he's built in that personal time. But when he's blocked out the other times, like Jason was saying, to be an artist or any solo entrepreneur and be successful, you're wearing a lot of hats, and the only way you get everything done is be organized and committed And using these kind of tools helps you do that, and that's what we want for you. We want you to become more successful, to be able to sell more art, to have more collectors, and have a long, fruitful career. And you can't do that and waste away your time. So these tools really help you get focused on what's important to you and how to go about making sure that you get the things that are most important done. And
I'd be willing to bet that there's a good number in our audience right now, artists who would say, but Barney, Jason, the whole reason I became an artist was so that I could have freedom, and so that I wouldn't be locked down into any kind of schedule, and plus the muse only really comes to me when it wants to come. I can't block out time and then insist that my inspiration show up right at that time. But I think that what you will find, and I would encourage you to experiment with this, that is, as you set these goals and start to break them down and work towards them systematically, and as you make a plan for your time, doing an ideal week and blocking out that time, it actually takes, as Barney mentioned, a lot of the stress off, but it also just allows you to get into a zone and frees you up. And if anything, that's what I'd say, is that having goals and setting objectives and making plans and being conscious of your efforts to move forward gives you a great deal of freedom and a sense of accomplishment as you achieve those things. And what I think you'll find is that as you get into the habit of making goals and accomplishing these things, you're going to suddenly realize that you can use these same principles in every aspect of your life. I find myself, I'm an avid reader, and I love reading books, but a few years ago, I think as a direct result of having put more effort into organizing my work life, I realized that, hey, I bet I could read more books if I was systematic about it and started setting goals. And so now I break it down to how many pages I'm going to be reading every day, and set dates to when I want to finish reading a book. And you might ask, well, doesn't that just take the pleasure out of something that you do, as a hobby? But I find, again, it's the exact opposite of that. That it gives me something attainable, and it pushes me to do more, and it allows me to prioritize and not let other things creep in and take over. And no matter how busy you are in life, you can find ways to carve out the time to accomplish what you need to accomplish and what you want to accomplish. And so if you use these tools, you're going to be more effective at doing that.
You gave me that goal of 10 pages a day a couple of years ago, I think, and that, if a book is 300 pages long, you will have read a book in a month by only reading 10 pages a day. And who can say I don't have time to read 10 pages in a book? You just don't want to, if that's the case. And I started doing that. I started setting aside some dedicated time, and it might only be 15 minutes to do some reading, and I'm plowing through more books than I ever did because I would buy them. I love to read them, but I was finding that I had squandered my time in some other way, and I wasn't getting to the books, so I was feeling, like I wasn't accomplishing something that was important to me. And I'm surprised you didn't jump on this, Jason, because I know you've written about it, and so have I, when you were talking about artists and their muse, and you probably know where I'm going with this, and that's Chuck Close, who said, I think famously, something along the lines, inspiration's for amateurs, the rest of us should just get to work, and the inspiration will come out of doing the work. And I know 100% that is a fact. I write a blog post weekly. I have for years, and I write a lot more than that during the week on different things that I'm working on, maybe a new book or whatever. But that blog post comes out every Sunday morning. That blog post is delivered, and there are times when I don't know what I'm going to write about. I have a lot of things on my calendar, I plan a lot of blog posts that I know I'm going to write about. There are sometimes when I have a subject and I don't know, I know I want to write about that subject, and it's somewhere mixed up in me some way that I want to get this out, but I really don't have a good plan for it. So I just start writing. And to me, it's like close. I start doing the work, and just by virtue of doing the work, it comes to me. Something happens, and the next thing I know, I've got a flow going, and I'm at 600 or 800 or 1,200 words, and I don't even know where it came from, but I believe it came out of the discipline of, I'm not going to let this go. I'm not going to set this aside. This is the time that I've set aside to work on this, and I'm going to make it happen. And it's never failed me. So the people that are saying I have to wait for the muse are working on a hobby. If you want this to be a career, you have to be productive. You have to create enough work to keep the pipeline full, and you have to equally work at making the demand for the pipeline. And if you're not doing both of those things on a regular basis, you have a career, or you have a hobby, which is fine. Nobody will put you down for that. But if you want to make this into something that is a profitable, long-term career, you have to be committed to your career, and I don't believe you can do that waiting for the muse or being disorganized and being reactive instead of proactive. So
I think it's important too for us to acknowledge the fact that there are going to be times, even when you have goals and you've taken steps to delineate those goals and break them down. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be discouraging times. You're going to have days where you say, "Oh man, am I sure I want to do this? Is this what I want to accomplish? Boy, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. This isn't any fun." And that's just part of. I mean, anything worth accomplishing is going to be hard to accomplish, and there are going to be times when you're going to be frustrated, where you're not going to see it going your way. And so, I want to be careful, because I don't want us to make it sound like, oh, it's easy to accomplish your goals. There's no sweat to it. You just have to do this and this and that, and you'll be great. Because everyone runs into frustration and to challenges and things you didn't expect, and things don't go the way that you hoped they would go. But as we've been talking about tonight, it's the overcoming of all of that and the pushing through all of it that leads to the greatest accomplishments. And working hard is its own great reward, and leads you to accomplish those great things that you want to accomplish in your life.
I agree. Well said. We haven't hardly touched on project planning, and other than getting things on a calendar and breaking them down, there are some tools that you can use if you want to get more organized than a calendar. You could use a spreadsheet that works equally well, or you can actually, there are some softwares like Insightly. The word insight.ly is a Google Chrome extension that has a CRM, customer management program, and a project manager built into that, so you can assign a project and actually put a team member on it if you want to, and give that person a goal, or yourself. But it's another way to help remind you of the task. And I'm big on using tools. I don't like using more than you need. I think you can become just overwhelmed with too much tech. In fact, I used to use Insightly, but I stopped because I found that a spreadsheet and a calendar for what I'm trying to achieve worked perfectly well for me, and I just didn't need to have one more piece of software that I had incorporated into what I'm doing. I may be moving back into Insightly this year, but for now, a spreadsheet with goals, timelines, and then taking those timelines and putting them onto a calendar works for me. I don't know how you're managing it. Jason, you mentioned you had a tool called Workflowy to me earlier.
Yeah. So, and I think what you said is very important. That you can take any tool that you want to, but don't get caught too much up in that. And then we live in a great time where I think it's very easy for us to say, you know, shoot, I wish that I could do this or that. You know, I wish that there was something out there that would help me accomplish it in such and such way. And that was what led me to this last tool that I wanted to share, which is called Workflowy. It's kind of a funny name, but I tend to think in a pretty linear way about things, and I tend to outline everything that I'm working on. I've kept, over the years, I will buy sketchbooks like this, and you'll see that I just make tons and tons of notes as I'm working on things and try and break everything down. I do design stuff in it. But I realized that for some of the bigger projects, that wasn't necessarily the most efficient way for me to try and plan them out. You know, again, art shows or publicity and promotion that we were doing. And so I said, boy, I sure wish I had some way to just create outlines that would then allow me to get my thoughts out and then move things around as I needed to. And did a Google search for it, and sure enough, it existed, and it's called Workflow. And I'm just going to briefly show it to you here. And it is another tool that's kind of creeping into my broader life. It's basically one document that will allow you to break down you know, your whole life in essence, and if you watch their videos, they'll show you they suggest that you first start out by breaking things down into your work and personal, and then within each of those you can then just keep diving in deeper and deeper, and so it allows you to kind of just go through and create a variety of broken down lists, and then you can look at each one of them individually and start planning out what you want to be working on within those, and you can favorite the ones that you're working on, and you can tag them, and like I say, for me it just worked as a perfect tool to be able to plan out and break down and dive in deeper to each of my projects. And so I use it in conjunction with a calendar and with Todoist. It allows me to expand on my thoughts and then take those over to Todoist or put them on my calendar as I need to do appointments. So again, another possibility, we've mentioned several of them, Todoist and Workflowy and the ones that Barney mentioned, and the Ideal Week. But you need to find the combination of tools that work for you and make it easy for you, and then just force yourself to be disciplined about using them consistently on a daily basis. And you know, I think that's the last key that I would mention, as we're quickly running out of time this evening, is that if you've got big goals, you do need to be thinking about and looking at and reviewing those big goals at the very least on a weekly basis, and preferably on a daily basis, so that you keep that focus and keep yourself moving forward. And that's been incredibly powerful for me in my life and in the business with Xanadu Gallery, is just having those goals set up in a way that they're constantly in front of me, that I'm always able to think about them and work on them and keep my focus. And you know, focus is just such a key. You think of the great things that have been accomplished over the history of the world. Some of them are almost unimaginable. You know, the digging of the Panama Canal or the building of the pyramids, and every single one of them was accomplished by someone having an idea, a dream that they wanted to accomplish. And then setting goals and breaking those goals down into tasks that they could then push through and accomplish these things. And you can do that same thing in your art career. Set some big goals for yourself, push yourself, be ambitious, and then take these tools and set the goals and push yourself forward, and you will be amazed at what you can accomplish.
Put the big rocks in first.
Well, Barney, I think we've covered a lot of ground here tonight, and hopefully given everybody something to think about. Any last things that you wanted to mention about goal setting or project management before we closed?
No, I think I would like to mention I put this URL down there, and it's actually incorrect on my signature. I would like to mention my workshop. The 8 Steps to Art Marketing Mastery. It's ongoing right now. The first of there's 4 90-minute sessions, so it's 6 hours of intensive art marketing instruction, help, ideas, information, and inspiration for artists, and a lot of it includes things like goal setting, project planning, but it's in much greater detail. It includes a free copy of my book, How to Guerrilla Marketing for Artists. There's a private Facebook group for those people who are participating, so there's a place where they can go share information privately and encourage each other. I'm hoping that there will become a de facto accountability kind of session where people can come in and put their goals in there, and the rest of us will say, hey, Barney, did you get that done this week? Or, you know, try to encourage each other. But anyway, the next session, the second session, is on Thursday. All the sessions are recorded. You have lifetime access to them. So if you're interested in learning more about it, go to x.co/art1234, and that will get you to the page where you can learn more about it. And I hope you will seriously consider it, because I'm committed to the artists that are in that program. I want them to be successful, and I will work with them every way that I can to take ideas like we've talked about today and put meat on the bone and turn something that's theoretical into something that's real, and work at it until, okay, this is working for me, now let's move on to the next step. That's my goal, is when you come out of there, that you've got a solid plan that you have a buy-in on, that you know that you can succeed at, and take a look at it. I'd love to have you join. It'd be easy for you to catch up. You can just watch the recording from last week, see this one coming live. If it doesn't work for you in the time frame, obviously you've got the recordings to listen to again. So that's my pitch. I believe in self-promotion, and I'm teaching everybody that's listening to me to be prepared to talk about things that are important to them, that will help others, and to help, and in a way, help themselves. So I hope you'll consider joining me and the other artists who are in that group now.
And I'd like to encourage all of those of you who've been listening to this session, if you haven't signed up for our mailing lists yet, I'd encourage you to do that. We send out notifications of upcoming broadcasts. You can sign up for my mailing list by going to www.red.blog.com. And Barney, what's the best address for them to go to sign up for your mailing list?
You can get it at x.co/Barney, or just go to Art Print Issues, my blog, and there in the sidebar you'll find the sign-up form. I'm a strong proponent in believing that you should have a sign-up form in multiple places on any place you have a web presence. So you could also get it on my art marketing, Barney Davey Art Marketing Services Facebook site. But easiest place, just go to artprintissues.com. You'll find it right in the sign-up button right on the right-hand sidebar.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this broadcast again, and we will be back here this same time, second Tuesday. We're here second Tuesday of every month, and if you're on our mailing list, we'll be sure and send out an invite to you to join us for the next session. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Barney. Great evening.
Yeah, Jason, really enjoyed it. Peace out, everyone.